Oh, hello. Who am I, you ask? Well, that's on a need-to-know basis, and I guess you need to know. I'm Donnell from the Watching It podcast, a little podcast where me and my co-host Robert dive into different TV shows and movies to give our viewpoints and reviews. TV shows like The Boys to the 1999 hit movie The 13th Floor. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, come join us at watchitpod.com or on any podcast provider.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Thanks for joining the Backlook Cinema Podcast with Zach and Zoe.
On this show, we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear.
That means we're going to talk about some of the best movies from the 70s, 80s, and early 90s.
So thank you for joining us. Now let's get it started in here.
Hi, my name is Zach.
And this is Zoe, and welcome to the Backlook Cinema Podcast with Zach and Zoe, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear. And the reason we started this show was to strengthen the bond between my son Zach and me, Zoe. And we watch movies that I love when I was growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and we get Zach's impressions of these great movies.
I was going to say what number episode this is, or?
Yeah, it is the 48th episode. I've been forgetting that lately. I've been forgetting to name the episode, but it is the 48th episode of the Backlook Cinema Podcast. All right, I'm good. I got it.
All right. Okay, good. If you like our show, then rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser.com, or your favorite podcast app.
And please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find the details in the show notes. And on this episode, we continue with all Halloween all the time. This month, we're going to go over to one of my favorite horror movies. And to help us out is our first ever repeat guest. She is an award-winning author, and she has her own podcast where she interviews the most intriguing guests. So you can catch her latest book and listen to her podcast. That is the Better Two Podcast. Please welcome once again, everybody, DM Needom.
Hi.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thanks. Yeah.
Need it. So I mentioned that you just published another in the series of the My Days with the Dark Muse.
Unfortunately, you mentioned it, but I wish I could mention it, but unfortunately I hit some snags.
Oh no, the snags.
Yes, the podcast has been kind of taking on a life of its own. So my intention was to have it in November out, but unfortunately, nah. It'll be a little bit later because the podcast is like really, really doing a lot of things. So yeah.
Okay. So,
but I'm honored. I'm honored to be a repeat guest for the first time. So thanks.
Right. So the next book that we're eagerly waiting for is I can see it in the background.
It's
Love is Worth Waiting For.
No, actually, that one is already out.
Oh, that's already out.
That one's already out. The next book is actually Fairy Tales and I Love You.
Oh, Fairy Tales and I Love You. So
that
the one that I just mentioned, Love is Worth Waiting For, that is that part of the Days with the Dark Muse series?
Right now it is a standalone in the series. Some of the characters from the series are in it. It's romantic suspense. However, right now it's a standalone, but eventually it will be part of the series. It'll work its way in there because that book is set in 1997. Right now what I'm writing is set in 1984.
Okay.
So there's kind of a bridge that will be built to bring it in.
You had mentioned, let's see. So what's the name of the next book again?
Fairy Tales and I Love You.
So Fairy Tales and I Love You, is that going to be in the same format as the previous book?
It is written as a duet. My Days with the Dark Muse is written as a journal. So it's a bass player's journal. And how that ties in is ultimately, I'm going to give too much away, but I'm going to have to if I say this. Ultimately, the thing about My Days, which nobody really realizes, and it's been out for a couple of years, so I'll give the twist away. In the beginning of the book, he's in a studio with his friend, and if you're really paying close attention, he ODs. And you go on this whole journey through it. And in the end of the book, he wakes up. So what you've read is this whole journey of it being set. It goes from 1984 in the studio to 1997 in the journal. And then you wake up back in 1984. Most people don't know that. And what I'm writing there is how much of what he dreamed while he was under in a coma is reality. That's how the next books roll into it. So what can be changed from his coma?
Right. That is going to be a most fantastic journey for those who are waiting for the next in the series.
Yeah.
So how have you been doing? What is the what's one of the most impactful guests that you've had on your podcast so far? I know it's on hiatus, but from this past season, what's some of the most impactful guests that you can talk about?
Well, I just wrapped up the season with a singer called Merchant. His father is actually the creator of Z Nation. He's one of the co-executive producers of Z Nation. So we talked a little bit about Z Nation as far as he did some songs for that. He has a new single out. I've talked to, here's the funny thing, because some of my episodes I taped that haven't aired yet. So even though the new season hasn't started, one of the biggest guests that I will be kicking off the new season with has already been recorded, and that was former Prime Minister for Australia. And I talked to him a little bit about what it was like to be a bodyguard and how it differs from reality and in the movies, and about his gambling addiction, because he blew $2 million of his own money playing the ponies. And it basically ended up costing him his career and everything. So it's not just about that, because there's so much to unpack there. And there's just, you asked me what guest made an impression. You had a great story, and I love the stories that you told, the personal stories you told about being over in Iraq. And that's the thing about my show. It's like, do you want me to pick one guest? That's really, really hard.
Well, not one, but just several, a couple, not.
It's hard because when I look at how I started this podcast, I had a friend or so come on, and then I've had so many different people from different walks of life. You were in the military. I had some girl that didn't know she could sing until she hit college. I had another lady who was mired in perfectionism. I had somebody dealing with grief. So it's like, as I told somebody, because they asked me, what's the common thread of your podcast? It's the human experience.
Right.
And the funny thing, and this is what I like, and I've had feedback, is that whenever you tune in my podcast, you're not sure what kind of trip you're going to get that day.
Right. Yeah, I've heard some fascinating stories in your podcast. It kind of reminds me of another show. I'm sure you've heard of My Favorite Murder.
Mm-hmm.
So on that podcast, they've kind of transitioned away from just talking about murders. So they also talk about, they also have human stories where people write in and tell their stories. So they used to just write about their own murders that they've had in their hometowns. And then they just started talking about basically anything that was interesting in their life. So it kind of reminds me of something that happened where I was a missing person for a few hours.
What?
Yeah, I was a missing person, but I didn't know it. But I have to get the full story from my mom, because she's the principal in that story. I just so happened to be in it.
Well, yeah, that might make an interesting story all in itself.
Right. So I had no memory of it. It was only a few years ago when one of my cousins was over. We moved into an apartment. Cousin was over, and then she brought that story up. I have no memory of it.
Wow.
But
you always got to love when you don't know something about your past, but somebody else enlightens you, and you're like, what?
Right. And it's something I might have remembered, because it's not like I wasn't 2 years old. I wasn't 3 years old. I was a latchkey kid. I was going to elementary school. So this happened when I had lots of adventures trying to go into elementary school. On the first day of school, I got lost.
Oh no.
Coming back to my apartment, because I couldn't remember how to walk from the bus stop to my apartment. I remember not quite knowing how to open a lock. That always gave me trouble. I always lost my key to my apartment, because all it would take was some 5-year-old girl to say that she liked my keys, and next thing you know, I'm locked out and have to get new keys.
Oh wow. But here's to being a latchkey kid.
Right.
100% understand.
All right. So we could shoot the crap all day long.
That we
But
could.
the reason that we got together was to talk about this one particular movie. Zachary, what movie was that?
Fright Night.
Fright Night.
Mhm.
You didn't want to say it with the vigor.
No, not at all.
You didn't want to put some sauce on that one.
No.
He's like, after you guys made me watch this movie, no, not at all.
So, Zach, tell us about Fright Night.
A teenager discovers that the newcomer in his neighborhood is a vampire. So he turns to an actor in a television horror show for help dealing with the undead. That was by Dynasty Noble via IMDb.
Right. So, Fright Night is one of my favorite movies that I've grown up with. And it came out in August 2nd, 1985 by Columbia Pictures and Vistar Films. It grossed over $24 million in the US and Canada on an approximately $9 million budget. And it had great reviews. So it did pretty good. It did basically double his budget. So and that's all you can ever ask for when you're dealing with movies and such. So and I didn't realize that so many people like it. Like when I was doing my research on Rotten Tomatoes and trying to find like the bad reviews, there were very few bad reviews. The bad reviews for this movie in the usual locations is slim pickings, right? It was usually you could find a bunch of, but I could barely find any here. So I guess that speaks to the popularity of this movie. So who's in this movie, Zach?
We have Chris Sarandon. Sarandon?
Sounds
Chris
good to me.
Sarandon as Jerry Dandridge.
Yep.
Yeah, Jerry Dandridge. He was in Child's Play, The Princess Bride, and I guess this is a remake of Fright Night that came out in 2011 where he was DJ in a cameo.
Right. He was playing cameo as DJ, and I did not know it. Now I feel like I got to go watch the movie all over again just to see him do a cameo in the new Fright Night
2011.
movie. Right. Also, there's William Ragsdale, and he played Charlie Brewster. He was in Herman's Head, Justify, and Search Party. And I didn't remember. I actually watched that show, Herman's Head. It was only on for like maybe a season, where he played a guy and there were people in his head. So I don't know if you've seen that, Deanna.
No.
Dina. Oh, okay. So, and I'm not surprised that you hadn't. Like I say, it was only on for a second. But when I rewatched the movie, I was like, yeah, I remember that dude from Herman's Head. These other shows and movies. I know Justified was very popular, but I never watched it, and I have no idea what Search Party is. Go on, Zach. Who's next?
We have Amanda Barris. I'm pretty sure it's Barris. She played as Amy Peterson. She was in Married and WTH Children.
Oh, dag. You know what? I wrote that all wrong. That's a typo. That's Married with Children.
Okay, Married with Children. Oh, wow.
And I want to go back. It's Chris Sarandon. So that's okay. Sorry.
So, Chris Sarandon, who's that?
That's the guy who played Jerry.
Jerry.
Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, on speaking of Amanda, that's the only thing I really know her from is Married with Children. When I was looking at her career, she really hadn't been in anything that I'm all that familiar with. She had some small TV roles, some movie roles in movies that I had not heard of. But so she was like one of the most important characters in Married with Children. She played a character called Marcy Darcy. So you gotta love that. So also next is Roddy McDowall. He played Peter Vincent. He was on Planet of the Apes, Batman the Animated Series, and The Ticks. And he is one of the greatest of our character actors. And it's just that voice. Like when you hear his voice, you're like, oh, that's the man. That's the dude. That's Roddy McDowall. He's so famous and popular that a lot of times he plays himself, or he plays a caricature of himself, right? Because his voice is so distinctive. Who's next, Zach?
Stephen Gregory's.
That's Jeffries.
Oh, Jeffries. He was Evil Ed. He was in At Close Range, Moon 44, and 976 Evil.
Yeah, so his performance it gave me a lot of Beavis and Butthead vibes. I don't know which came first, this movie or Beavis and Butthead, but he was. Do you think it was this one?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So I think that the guys who created Beavis and Butthead got their inspiration from Stephen Jeffries and his performance in this movie, because he was really overacting it out, but it worked for this show. Next is Jonathan Stark. He played Billy Cole. He was in Ellen, House 2, The Second Story, and According to Jim. Who's next?
We have Dorothy Fielding as Judy Brewster. She was in Kiss Me Goodbye, Street Elsewhere, Remember, Remington Steel.
There you go.
Remington
You got it.
Steele.
You worked it out. Yeah. Umango is Saint Elsewhere, not Street Elsewhere.
Oh, Saint Elsewhere. Okay.
Right. Yeah. Remember, ST before the name is Saint. ST after the name is Street. So yeah, I don't know or remember her, but she was in some of my favorite shows. Lastly, we have Art Evans. He played Detective Lennox. He was in Die Hard 2, Ruthless People, and Trespass. Now, Zach, I'm sure you remember good old Art Evans.
He was a police cop, right?
Right. He was the detective that he was brought over to the house, and then he was like, the next time you come to the police station, we're gonna throw you in jail. So do you remember him from? Yeah. You remember him from Die Hard 2?
Like I said, I'm pretty sure he was the police cop in Die Hard 2.
No.
Okay.
Dina, do you remember?
No.
So he was in Die Hard 2. He was he played like airport security. So he was the one that John McClane had wrangled in to help him. He was also he was that guy. He was also in The Soldier Story, and in The Soldier Story, he was that private. He was a sergeant, and then he got busted down to private. And he was the one that was so in love with the murder victim, the sergeant that everybody hated, and then only to later on to admit in the film that everybody hated that. I hated that man. He took my stripes.
The person I remember from Die Hard would be the dad from Family Matters. I can't remember the actor's name.
Oh, you're talking about Family Matters. Oh yeah, that was the first Die Hard movie.
Yeah,
I think he had an appearance in the second Die Hard, but he was primarily in the first Die Hard movie. He was the one eating the Twinkies. Yeah. He knew the ingredients by heart. That was lovely. Tell us about the director, Zach.
This was directed by Tom Holland. He directed Child's Play, Thinner, and Fatal Beauty.
I should say that not Tom Holland, the actor that we know as Spider-Man. This is a totally different Tom Holland person. This movie was also written by Tom Holland. He actually writes many of the movies that he directs. And he also wrote Psycho 2, Psycho 2 and Cloak and Dagger. I don't think he directed either of those, but he did write Thinner and Child's Play. So I think he directed those movies as well. So he's deep into horror. He loves the horror. That's what he's known for. That's what he does. He's a horror maestro, probably not up there with somebody like John Carpenter or of that caliber. He's like the second tier when it comes to horror directors. Tell us about the music.
Music is by Brad Fiddle.
I think that's Fidel.
Oh, Fidel. He written music for True Lies, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, and Johnny Mnemonic. What the heck is with this N?
Right, it's mnemonic. Yeah, the N, mnemonic, the M, okay. The M is silent. Or it's not exactly silent, but it's so subtle that you don't have to pronounce it. So it's Johnny Mnemonic. Johnny Mnemonic it's kind of like the first version of the Matrix. Like it was when people first started doing movies about computers and virtual reality. This is one of the first movies that was about that sort of thing. So Johnny Mnemonic could project his mind into computers, similar to what's done in the Matrix. Dean, I don't suppose you've seen it, Johnny Mnemonic.
I remember it, but I did not see it.
Right. I saw it. It's not the most memorable of movies, but I always feel like I need to see it again. I need to see it with the current perspective.
That's a good thing or a bad thing, because if it doesn't hold up, which I have a feeling it won't hold up graphically.
Right. There's
So,
always a risk. Always a risk. So this movie had two producers. You had Jerry A. Burwitz and Herb Jaffe. So yeah, that's it. That's the rundown of the movie, Zach.
Yeah, that's it for the rundown. If you're enjoying the show, remember that you can get t-shirts, hoodies, mug, face masks, jerseys, and more at our website, backlookcinema.com, where you can click the link to either teesprings.com or tpublic.com. Now we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back to talk about our favorite parts of the movie, some movie trivia, and find out what some of the critics thought.
Hello, everyone. This is Robert with the Watching It podcast. We're a show that covers TV and movies. Join me and my co-host Donnell each week to talk about shows like Loki, The Lower Decks, Snowpiercer, Palm Springs, and Collateral. You can find us at watchingitpod.com or anywhere you get your podcast.
As a creature of the night, you may think that you can go about this modern world with the help of the internet and the gig economy. But there's just no replacement for a living, breathing Renfield. Now, taking care of a Renfield can be expensive. If you find yourself a newly made bloodsucker, you may not have the funds to afford to take care of a Renfield full time. That's where we come in. We are Rent a Renfield. If you can't afford a Renfield, you can rent one from us. Our Renfields are smart, courteous, resourceful, and incredibly strong. Just give us a call today, and one will be at your lair within a couple of hours. They'll be able to fortify your hideaway against the sun, shoo away nosy teenagers, and properly dispose of your latest meal. Renfields are indispensable companions for the undead. So call us today for affordable, docile servants, and you can sleep throughout the night with peace of mind.
We're back. Once again, thanks for joining us. You can keep up. Oh, see, there I go again. You can keep up with us by following our socials on Instagram and Facebook at Backlook Cinema Podcast and on Twitter at Backlook Cinema. We encourage you to leave feedback, comments, suggestions, etc. Or you can email us at fanmail@backlookcinema.com. Yes, I did mess that up in the beginning. Yes, I had to go back and try to, it's weird that you can write something down and then not be able to read your own words. It's strange, and I like it. So
I understand.
So let's talk about our favorite parts of the movie, shall we? Dina, why don't you start us off?
Chris Sarandon, the lead vampire, he had a very, very nice charisma to him. He had this, but it was 80s. I mean, let's be honest here. It was the 80s. So what was attractive and hip and cool and sexy then is not the same as it is now. So, back then he had the 80s suave. And if you compare it to like Colin Farrell playing the same role, it's totally different.
Right.
Totally different.
Colin Farrell definitely brings a modern aesthetic to the role. Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And while I love Roddy McDowall, I love him. I will say I think his hair was overpowdered. I think that they actually whited his hair up more, and I just wanted to walk up and pat it and see if it would smoke. But that being said, and I know we're not talking about the new one, but I have to. David Tennant in the new one, well, yeah, I'm going to be a girl. He was very, very hot. I'm not gonna lie. He plays Doctor Who, and he's the geekiest guy in the world playing Doctor Who. But as Peter Vincent, he was smoking hot in the leather pants. Okay, fair enough. Sorry to digress. But the movie overall, Fright Night, is one of my favorite horror movies as far as 80s. I don't like hard horror because, well, I'm a scaredy cat. But I will say this, I did find myself laughing when the guy started melting. I did, all the slime, which, you're not supposed to, but I can handle movies like that when it's got some fun to it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, speaking of the new Fright Night, the remake, when you mentioned what's his name, David Tennant, I think they were going for I hadn't seen it in a long time, but were they going for the Chris Angel aesthetic?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. They were totally going for the Chris Angel thing, and that's why the whole suave rock star kind of, Chris Angel, because most hypnotists and stuff, they play up their image. Look at David Copperfield back in the day. I'm not going to go with Doug Henning, because Doug Henning, that was spandex and all that. And I know most likely I'm dating myself, and your listeners like, who the hell was she talking about? Sorry. But, they were going for the suave rock star, where in the classic Fright Night, because that's a better way to say it, they went for somebody that was more, the traditional horror genre vampire hunter, the one with the coat and the cross, and just you could almost see him with the spyglass and the little hat, the way he was dressed at times. So
yeah,
kind of a Sherlock Holmes feel to him.
I think they were specifically going for Vincent Price.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Zach, what were some of your favorite parts?
I'm trying to think about that. I guess I would say what's his name? Trying to look Charlie found out that his neighbor might be a vampire because he was looking through his window and he seen him with fangs and claws, I guess. Claws, yeah.
Talons.
Talons. I was like, that was a good one. Just have the main character see, like, yeah, there's a reason why he was suspicious in the first time when he saw a coffin being brought into the house of this newly neighbor. It's like, okay, we got a newly neighbor. There's a coffin being brought down to the basement of that house. There's something weird going on, especially when the first thing that happens, I think the next day come out, oh yeah, there was a murder. And then the next day, there's another murder. Here's the victim that was murdered. It was like, right. Oh, I remember that girl. I seen her in that house. Okay. Connections are there. That guy's a vampire.
Right. I like that they had some tenuous connections, but I think like he flashed forward. You know what I'm saying? He made some incredible leaps of logic. First of all, what we know about Charlie is that he's maybe not necessarily a peeping Tom, but he's definitely a nosy neighbor. Like he had binoculars on the ready. So he is constantly looking at other people. Secondly, he's a little too forceful with the ladies. He was way too aggressive with his girlfriend. It was like, man, this dude's has some issues. I think the only thing his saving grace is what do you call it? That he's a teenager, supposedly. So
well, yeah, and wasn't he like in his that's the funny thing when you look at him, neither one looked like teenagers. Evil kind of looked like a teenager.
Yeah, but Evil really looked like a teenager to me. And I think that Charlie did affect a teenager look, but Amanda, no, not at first, yeah, like especially in the beginning, but then kind of later on, it's like, oh no, she's definitely in her 20s.
as soon as she went to the club scene and they were dancing together, it's like suddenly she did not look like a teenager at all, and maybe that's what they were going for, but it was just kind of like, yeah, you've rapidly aged her quickly. I mean, there was no longer playing. But then look at Grace. Right. If you look at Grace, all of them are teenagers. No.
Right. I think what's effective about Amanda is that she effectively looks like a teenager when she's dressed. She looks like a teenager when she's dressed like a teenager, right? And then she looks like an adult when she's dressed like an adult. So I think with her in particular, it kind of depends on what she's wearing and if she has makeup on or not. Like I think when she was in the club, she had a lot more like adult makeup than when she was like playing a teenager at her boyfriend's house. Yeah, I think that speaks to her ability to subtly morph into what she needed to be at a particular time. But yeah, it was at the same time it could bring you out of the movie.
Well, let's go here for a second. So he bites her. She's in transition. Now, when Evil transitioned, did his hair change? I know he didn't he transitioned into something else, but at the time you didn't know he was transitioning into something else. You thought he was going to transition into a vampire. What was the deal with her hair growth?
Yeah. They had all of a sudden she had long hair. I mean, Evil
and a different color.
Yeah. Well, Evil's hair did kind of change color a little bit, and it was like way more spiky. I think early on it was a lighter shade of brown, and then when he turned, he was like very dark brown hair, almost black. So yeah, it was some subtle differences.
Yeah, and I will say this: I give them kudos because up to a certain point, I think till you got to right past the club, the special effects for what they were held up. You know,
yeah,
because it was just it was just the eyes and just the talons on the hands, but that held up. It's when you got later into the movie that it started getting the worst part was the guy melting. That was the worst of the special effects.
Right.
But for 1985, it worked.
Yeah, it worked. So Zach, what's another one of your favorite parts?
When they go to Peter Vincent, what do I want to? Yeah, it's the second time they go to Peter Vincent, and they're like, "Hey, we need your help to tell our friend, Charlie that that his neighbor's not a vampire. Can you just do a little test? We'll pay you like $500." He's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." Even though he's getting one, he was fired from his job. Two, he's getting evicted. He's like, "Yeah, I'll do it. $500. I'll go ahead and help your friend out that I met earlier."
It's funny how he tried to fake like he's such a popular actor that he had to quit his job in order to take on a large movie role. And she was like, "We'll pay you $500." I was like, "I'll take it." It was like he didn't try to renegotiate. He didn't try to go up or down. He needed it immediately.
Well, and let's be fair. Let's put this in perspective. $500 back then, you could actually pay your rent and still have a little extra cash in your pocket.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was a lot. This movie came out in 1985. $500 was a lot of money in 1985. I think it's about at least $1,000 today, if not like 900 and something. So yeah, it was inflation went up a lot since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. I like the logic in that. And just Evil's entire attitude during the whole thing. The only thing I didn't get the only thing that kind of that I was annoyed by was that when Charlie first tried, he's decided that he's fighting a vampire. I don't remember if this was before or after the vampire actually revealed himself, but just he goes to Eddie, try to figure out how to fight a vampire, and I was like, don't you know? It's like you just watch vampire movies all of the time. I was like, the only thing that's on your TV is the show Fright Night with Peter Vincent, and all he shows is his own vampire movies, like the vampire movies that he stars in. Those are the only movies that play on his show. So why don't you know, right?
Well, but to be fair, if he's trying to get busy with his girlfriend, is he really paying attention to what's on the screen or her?
Right, but I'm fair. Right, that's true, but I'm assuming that he's watched it all the time, like before he met his girlfriend or when his girlfriend is not there. Is like he's watching it all of the time. So I feel like he should know some of these things. He didn't know about the crosses, the garlic, he didn't know nothing.
No.
So I liked all of that, how they set up is like so when Peter agrees to go ahead and go over and disprove that the vampire is a vampire, and he says okay, how about crosses? Like, nope, no crosses. Well, how about if I bring some holy water? It's like, I don't know about holy water. It's like, don't worry, it'll be just regular tap water, I promise. He should have been then. Something should have said, well, why is he I guess because he's pretending that he's been born again. The vampire is pretending that he's born again, and it would be sacrilegious to just drink holy water, because that's the reason why you couldn't bring crosses to his house, which is kind of weak.
It's very weak, because I'm thinking, if you're born again, usually most born agains are even more embracing of the crucifix and the Bible and those things.
Right. So yeah, that is suspect on his part, but it works. It works.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad I went back and rewatched it. I haven't watched it in years, and it was amusing as anything.
Yeah, yeah, Dina, I hadn't seen it in a while. I think I probably last saw it like 20 years ago, so I've forgotten a lot about it. It's like watching the movie all over again. So, did you have another favorite part you do want to go over?
You know, I think the ending still holds up, even though the makeup is really bad and the graphics were really bad. I think ultimately the ending, there was more of a purity to it than the more modern one. There was a more innocence, like the classic horror film. You know, when it ends, they break the windows, the beast is kind of, you know, flailing about, but there's this whole just, dare I say, classic vibe to it. You know, the green flames was kind of that was tacky and bad, but I mean, in the burning of the bat, that was bad, but still, all in all, just the hero, you know, you see the struggle. He's trying to save the girl. I mean, everything was there, that all the classic elements that you needed for just the plain old horror film from back in the day, the innocent horror films, not the blood and gore.
Right. Oh, it's funny that you say that, because Vincent actually alluded to that when he talked about him being fired from his job. You know, it's like now all they want is slasher movies, right? So and he kind of harkens back to the classic horror that he used to star in regarding vampires.
Yeah.
So Zach, what's another one of your favorite parts?
When Evil Ed goes to attack Peter Vincent, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was a good
Because this
one.
is when Peter Vincent's like, oh wait, that guy was telling the truth. His neighbor is a vampire, because I just saw the guy. He doesn't have a reflection, which again, shouldn't that also be on the test, other than just drinking holy water and bringing it across? Like, let's test your reflection. If it works, then if you don't have a reflection, then you're a vampire. If you do, then you're not. But
right.
the reflection should have been a part of the test.
Right.
But
it should have been part of the test. But the thing was that Vincent was so unconvinced that this dude is a vampire. Vincent and the kids. It's like I'm just gonna do one test for $500. I'm a peace out, because this is all ridiculous. I don't want to trouble this man that I don't know this guy. I don't want to trouble this stranger with this nonsense with these kids. I just want to do this one test and get out. So he agreed to the holy water test. He passed the holy water test that he knows has not been blessed.
Oh yeah, of course it wasn't blessed. I'm sorry. If that was really blessed, then come on.
Right.
Well, and let's think about it. And Peter Vincent's so hard up for cash. He's like looking at the guy going, can I have my bottle back?
Right. Like, what is you doing, man? Give my stuff back.
And, you know, this was the one thing that bothered me is, and maybe he was in shock, is, okay, so you see the vampire has no reflection. You drop your mirror. You bent down to pick up the mirror, but you didn't think, let me pick up that shard.
Right. Once he saw that there was no reflection, he was scared out of his wits. He just wanted to get his stuff and get out. He either missed the shard, or he was so scared that he just wanted to get out and not worry about it. But going back to where, you know, he's killing the minor vampire, he's killing Evil Ed. So the funny thing is that in this movie, there's a lot of running up in people's houses. Like, nobody locks their doors in this neighborhood.
That's my thought. I'm like, okay, I lived in the 1980s. We always locked our doors.
Right.
I mean, come on.
I can see if it was the country, right? And I spent part of my childhood growing up in North Carolina. We would spend our summers there. So the school ends, my mom and my aunt, and would ship my brothers and my cousin to my great grandmother's house in North Carolina. And it's country. Like, when we were growing up, it was like dirt roads. And it's like a house every like 3 acres away. Like, if your neighbor waved to you, really had to look to see that they were waving, right? Then most of our neighbors were our family. Like, the next neighbor that you can barely see was my cousins, and then like further on down the road, there were more aunts, great aunts, and more cousins, right? So you basically there was really no need to lock your doors. We still did it, right? So it's so weird that and they everybody's running up in everybody's house. Like Charlie runs up in the evil Ed's house to find out how do you kill vampires. And then the doc, I mean Vincent, he runs up into Charlie's house to find his mother because he does. And what was he going to do, right? Because he can't call the police. He was like, ma'am, your son's fighting a vampire, and I'm pretty sure he's dead. I just came to tell you that your son is fighting a vampire right now, and I'm scared. I don't know about you, but I'm scared. So that was his plan, I guess, just to warn his mom. And then he was done. but instead he has to fight the other vampire, Ed as the vampire, which is also funny. I really like that. I think the part that I like is Ed going through the transformations. Like he fights, he gets the classic fearing of the cross, right? You know, Vincent pull out the cross and he's frightened of the cross, and he has to jump out the window to escape or whatever, and then he transforms to a wolf, like all the classic vampire stuff. But the thing that kind of got me is that you know, he stakes the werewolf almost by accident, and he watches as he transformed from a werewolf back to, well, not, he wasn't a werewolf, he was a full-on wolf. He was a wolf, and he transformed from a wolf to a human, and it was like almost like trying to reach out and save him even though he was dying and he was still a vampire, right? It was like Vincent was perplexed. He didn't know what to do with this. It's almost like he's reaching out to touch him at the same time, really not wanting to touch him as he was transforming and dying at the same time. And then at the end, you have this naked kid who happens to be a best friend lying in the pool of his own blood. You got to figure out what you're going to do with that after you deal with the main vampire.
Oh, and this is where I had some questions about. Okay, so you watch the scar on his head heal. And you're sitting there, yes, he's naked, and you're perplexed because, here, you know, where's the mom at? Mom's at work. Okay, so we know mom's at work. So you're going to have to deal with this body if things progress. So we never deal with the body. Secondly, you pull out the stake. Well, if his head healed, isn't there the potential, just bear with me, isn't there the potential that where he was stabbed is going to heal?
I presume so, but since the wooden stake is the supernatural way to kill a vampire, like you can stake him with anything. Like if you stake him with like a stainless steel, or if you stake him with a plastic pike, that's not going to work. He'll heal from that, but he doesn't heal from the wooden stake, because that's the supernatural way of killing the vampire.
But vampires don't normally transform into wolves. So was he really a vampire? Or was he a wolf? Was he like on Legacies, a tri-bred?
Right. And I get it, because there's a lot of that going on in this movie. I would prefer to think that he's a vampire, since he's intimidated or perplexed, or what do you call it? He's the cross is damaging to him. Like the cross actually causes damage. He's frightened of the cross. So that would lend him to being a vampire. But and then depending on what vampire lure you like, it sometimes they can transform into wolves, sometimes it can't, or whatever. No, in most vampire lure, it's bats or fog, which they kind of use in this movie. So in this movie, they kind of added wolves. So I think in this movie, they're saying like, you know, they can transform into whatever. Where, you know, I didn't really bump up against that. I think that if you have a vampire and werewolf movies, then in that lore, they won't transform into wolves. But if you have a vampire movie absent of werewolves, then they can do whatever.
But then you have to look at the very end of the movie with the glowing eyes. So is that evil? That was my presumption, is that those eyes in that room and the window across, you know, because once again, we're playing Peeping Tom.
Right.
Is Ed, because even the laugh.
Right. Well, what do you think, Zach? Do you think that was evil Ed?
I don't know. It could be, but then again, they did kill the lead vampire, so it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, it wouldn't. Yeah, they killed the master vampire, and evil was already there, and presumably they had to bury his body again, and then they had to go tell evil Ed's parent that his either they don't contact his folks, or they do contact his folks and say, we think Evil Ed's missing. You better call the
Or he
police.
doesn't live with anyone.
Right. Nah, that's I don't know if that's likely that he doesn't live with anyone. It's not like that dude in that other movie we watched.
I mean, I'm still sticking with he's a werewolf.
Right,
I'm still
right,
sticking
right.
with that he was part werewolf. He healed, and
Right.
that was him. But I mean, I guess it's left open, and that's why they had a sequel.
Right. I never watched that one.
I don't remember the sequel.
Right. Oh, but you know what's funny? Like I alluded to that there was a lot of that going on because you had what in Vampire Lord they had the Renfield, the human helper of the vampire. But in this movie, the helper was not actually human. You find out, like, he gets shot in the head and then he rises and then he continues to pursue them no matter how many times he's shot. So he's not human. And they finally, what did they stick him in the heart?
Yeah, they stick him with a heart with a wooden stick, and apparently he's a zombie.
Right. So I'm thinking that he's either a zombie or a golem or something of that nature, right? He's not or he could be and what in some legends they call a Dhampir, like a half human, half vampire, where he's more human than he is vampire. But that he so there, I guess maybe there are levels of vampirism in this movie. So he's like on the weaker level.
Mean, it seems like since he can walk in the daylight and he's not affected by the cost.
Right. I'm thinking, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking that he's like a weak vampire or something like Blade.
Because like zombie, he doesn't fully fit the zombie thing because he can interact. And you shot him in the head, as we know from Zombieland. You know, you shoot him in the head, you take out the head. That's it for a zombie. So
right.
So I guess I'm gonna go with he's half vamp, half. You know, like, did you ever watch True Blood?
Yeah.
Okay, so they used to have the cocktail hostess that was basically a minion for them. She was controlled by them. She wasn't a vampire, but she was under their spell.
Right, but she was human, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was human.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe it's something along those lines.
Right. I think she was a classic version of a Renfield. So, but it like if she was at all supernatural, then she would be something different. But the dude, the helper in of the vampire in this movie, he was definitely something different. But that was pretty good. He was the one that melted. That was the one you were talking about. So it looks like the melting effect was he was actually I guess it was something that they just melted. It's some plastic, they just put some heat on it and it melted. It looked like it was filmed in reverse or something.
Well, some of it, I know, like the green stuff that was coming out of his pant leg looked like the green slime we used to play with as kids.
Right. So he had blood, he had green slime, he had sand, he had chicken bones, and he had and he melted. So he was full of stuff. He was a Frankenstein, maybe.
Or maybe he was a concoction by a witch. You know,
right,
I mean, once again, we're open for interpretation on this.
Right. That which is why we don't know what Evil Ed was. Maybe the master vampire don't even really control what he creates. He he'll bite something, he don't know how they're going to turn out.
yeah, exactly.
So Zach, what's another one of your favorite?
I guess like near the end when they're fighting both Jerry and Amy, where Charlie has to stop trying to stop Amy from biting him, and Peter Vincent has to somehow kill Jerry with the stake or with something.
Right.
Because the way they had to kill him was, it was pretty neat. First they hit him with the wooden stake, but apparently that didn't work in full effect because he straight out, pulled it out. I was like, okay, there's your plan A, where's your plan B? And then plan B was basically to break the windows so the sunlight would kill him.
Right.
Which worked.
Right. And they kind of broke a little bit of their own rules. But first I have to admire that he had painted all of his windows black, except for the window in the upstairs when he seduces one of his victims. Now, the funny thing about that is that he blames Charlie for all of the trouble he caused. He blames Charlie for, calling the police. He blames Charlie for throwing suspicion on him, of accusing him of being a vampire, so that now he has to work harder to hide from the human authorities or whatever. But my thing is, you showed him that you were a vampire. Why would you be in your window basically teasing this boy with your long, freaky looking fingers, slowly pulling down the curtain shade? Why are you up there in the window in the first place? Surely there are other rooms in your house, or the window could have been closed while you engaged in whatever you engaged in. It's like it didn't have to be open. So this is actually on you, bud. I'm putting all of the blame on your troubles on you.
But maybe that's the human condition always allows people to blame other people. So maybe that's his humanity still going, hey, it's all on this boy. Plus I get to, I'll kill him later.
Right. Oh, I also like that when he finds out that a vampire can't enter the house without being formally invited, and then he gets home and the vampire's already in his house.
Yeah.
Charming his mother, being all congenial and whatnot. Just a regular dude. That was a classic move. So that was pretty good. I'm just having a fun time remembering how good this movie was. I could see why it got so many positive reviews. There's also a part that I'm thinking of, but my memory is fleeting. I'm already forgetting everything that has happened in this movie. But here's something else I wanted to bring up. It's smart to paint the windows. I really like that. Painted all the windows in the house that would, be vulnerable to the vampire, but not smart enough to board up the windows with wood. Maybe he didn't get around to it, but I think that the second thing would be to do is to make sure that you boarded up the windows with wood.
Yeah, but here's the problem. By doing that, you're not looking so normal then. If you're boarding up the windows, it's not looking so normal. And let's go back to this. When Charlie decides, hey, I come home, the house over there looks vacant. Let me go try to get into the storm cellar, the basement, through the doors.
He's being a nosy neighbor. He's just very inappropriate behavior. Like, yes, he takes this is before the vampire is revealed to him. So he takes the thinnest of elements or the thinnest of excuses to decide to snoop on his neighbor. Like, all he really seen is somebody bringing a coffin. He may have prepaid for his coffin or something like that, because there are a lot of people that prepay for their coffins because it's cheaper that way.
But that was back, back in the day. Did they really do that? Now you get it at Costco and you're all happy. But back then,
yeah, back then, it's not likely. But still, I that's not enough evidence to accuse somebody of being a vampire.
No.
The other one was it was that, and I don't know, something else he saw. Was that when he saw the vampire with his long fingers? I don't know. It was
short. I think it was that night after that.
Oh no, it was a woman. He saw the sex worker going into the vampire's house, and then next thing you know, she's reporting on the news as dead. So that was his other piece of evidence. So now, based on those two things, this guy is definitely a vampire. I'm going to go snoop into his cellar and see what's what. Now, see if I can find this coffin and do what? I don't know. But to your point of them boarding up the windows, I think they would just board it up from the inside. They wouldn't do it from the outside where people can see. I think they would board up the windows from the inside. So, I mean, I wouldn't even think of somebody being in my house smashing the windows from the inside. I would just think, well, I'm gonna board up these windows just in case somebody throws a football or something from the outside, or there's a storm and something from the storm crashed into the windows. I'll board up my house, my windows, and I don't have to worry about my vampire being disturbed. So they got it half right? They got it. He painted the windows, but he didn't do enough. And then next thing you know, Charlie's breaking the windows. Well,
and let's be honest here for a second about Charlie. You're talking about Charlie being too aggressive with his girlfriend. Think about when, as soon as he saw the sex worker. I mean, if I'm surprised he didn't lie and say, "Oh yeah, the address is here." The way he was looking at her, it was like, what girlfriend?
Right. Well, he's a teenager.
Yeah, I know. I know. I'm just saying. I understand he's a teenager in trouble.
Right. He's a teenager. That's how teenagers are gonna act. I was one once. I remember that.
I know. We all were, and I get it. I mean, I'm telling you about David Tennant earlier in the podcast. So there you go.
I remember being attracted to everybody. Yeah. So yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Are there any other comments? Anybody got something else they want to shout out that they really like?
Nope, not at all.
All right.
I think it was a good movie. I mean, for I think the movie, if you want a horror movie, go watch the new version. If you want something that's kind of funny, then watch this one. I mean, that's the way it is. It's a good movie for what it is.
Right. Yeah, this movie was definitely a movie for its time. So we had gone over the credits earlier, and I want to do a special shout out to Brad Fidel, who did the music, because he hit exactly the right the right I guess a emotion, or the right. So I'm having hard time finding the words. I think it's because, like I mentioned my memory before,
he created the perfect scene, the perfect setting and the vibe for it.
The perfect vibe, the perfect atmosphere. Those are the words. Thank you. I appreciate that. I was looking for those words, couldn't find them. That music created a great atmosphere for this movie, and it totally works. So I am going to go ahead and switch over to talking about the trivia that we picked up from IMDb. So I'll go ahead and start it off. Although the part of Peter Vincent was based upon and originally written for Vincent Price to play, Roddy McDowall decided Peter Vincent was not in the same league as Price. My part is that of an old human actor. I mean, a dreadful actor. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. It's an old ham actor, a dreadful actor. McDowall commented in 1985 interview with Monsterland magazine. He had a moderate success in an isolated film here and there, but with all the bad product. Basically, he played one character for 8 or 10 films for which he probably got paid next to nothing, unlike stars of horror films who are very good actors and played lots of different roles as Peter Lorre and Vincent Price or Boris Karloff. This poor son of a bitch just played the same character all of the time, which was awful. So yeah, because he always talked about his name being a character, it's not even his name.
All right. It was Chris Sarandon's idea to have Jerry eating apples throughout the film. While researching vampire lore, Sarandon looked at information about bats and concluded Jerry had a lot of fruit bat in his DNA.
Yeah, I guess we can go with that. You know what? In the remake, you had Colin Farrell eating a lot of apples too.
Yeah,
I remember that. So they kept that in the second movie.
The film's genesis came in Tom Holland wanting to do a vampire story, crossbred with The Boy Who Cried Wolf. Avoiding using special effects at the expense of good acting, Holland included plenty of humor, warmth, and relationships. He also wanted to make it valid to a modern audience by rooting it in reality, hence the suburban setting.
Right. I think that all worked pretty good. And it did have a lot of The Boy Who Cried Wolf. The only difference is that in a different way, like The Boy Who Cried Wolf, he's like crying wolf, and there is absolutely no wolf, like no evidence of wolf. He's just doing it to mess with people. But in this movie, what do you want to say?
I was just gonna go. He did cry wolf a couple of times. At least he cried wolf once. Evil did, and then he allegedly was bitten, and then he turns into a wolf.
Well, that was Evil cried wolf. Yeah.
I know.
But what we're talking about is Charlie overreacting to the slightest of evidence.
I know. I'm just throwing that out there.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, he actually Evil did cry wolf that one time, and then the second time it cost him because there was an actual. Well, actually, he accepted the vampire's embrace. The only reason he screamed was because it hurt. It hurt to get bitten.
Yep. Yeah.
At least it hurt him. He wasn't as deep in the vampire spell as Amanda was when she was bitten, I guess.
Yeah.
So because of because of its theatrical roots and the long hours in the makeup chair, Chris Sheridan helped apply his own vampire makeup and often worked on the finger extensions while the makeup artists were putting applications on his face. So they're busy putting on the putty with his eyebrows and cheekbones, and he's fiddling with his fingers, making sure his finger extensions were just right. So it was cleverly acted too, because he never actually bends his fingers, but at the same time, they don't look fake. Like they look like they're actually part of his fingers. So good job on Sheridan for getting that done. Go on, Zach.
Frustrated that they never been asked to do a DVD extra, all the principal cast members except Amanda Beers, who was unavailable at the time, recorded 2 pirated commentaries, which was released as free MP3s on the Icons of Fright website in 2008. Due to contractual stipulations with Sony, distributors Twilight Time was unable to produce original content for the 30th anniversary edition Blu-ray release in 2015. So they included both commentaries and other pre-existing bonus materials.
Yeah, there you go. They were like, how come we don't get to do no DVD commentaries? We want to do DVD commentaries. So that's actually kind of funny. Go ahead, Dina.
The crew spent a lot of time and money composing the scene where Jerry walks through Mr. Brewster's bedroom and Mrs. Brewster's bedroom and casts no reflection in the mirror. It doesn't work, director Tom Holland has frequently commented. The audience never notices because I framed it badly.
Well, I don't know. I think I caught it right away. Like, I guess he framed it good enough, right?
Yeah.
And they did it twice. Was he talking about any particular scene? He's on the bedroom scene. Oh, wait a minute. Hold on a second. No, I guess I didn't see it. I didn't notice it in the bedroom scene. I'm thinking about the earlier scene when Vincent had his little pocket mirror. Mm-hmm. And then there was another scene in the club where we didn't even talk about the club scene, but there was another scene in the club where the vampire is putting the mojo on Amanda and basically drawing her to him. And while she's dancing with him, you can see her reflection in the club mirror, but you can't see his reflection. So I guess in the times that they did do it, it worked, but there were times when they tried to do it and it didn't work.
Though apparently they're in one of the goofs here on Internet Movie Database, there is some discussion that during one scene in the club, not the one that you're talking about, but there's another shot where you can see his reflection. But I don't have that much. I don't have that much time to invest in a movie to go through and find these little glitches. But
right. Yeah, working with mirrors is tricky. I'm thinking in particular about. I don't know if you saw The Suicide Squad, the movie that just came out about the Suicide Squad. So in the Suicide Squad, Zach, do you remember when the two characters fighting? The two characters are Peacemaker and what's his name?
Bloodsport.
No, not Bloodsport. The Colonel dude. So this is when
Colonel Rick Flag.
Right. So in the beginning, they filmed the fight. Like the Peacemaker, he wears this metal helmet. So if you go look at what's his name? Who played Peacemaker?
John Cena.
Yeah. So you know John Cena, Dina?
Yeah, I know who. Yeah.
Okay. So John Cena, he plays a gigantic Peacemaker. I don't call him about gigantic because he's gigantic in a film. I just call him gigantic because John Cena's a gigantic too.
Yeah. I get it.
So if you look at that, he wears a metal helmet. It's highly reflective, so you can see everything. So filming reflective material is always difficult for filmmakers because you can catch the cameras and people in the background. But I guess through a combination of computer trickery and careful filmmaking, they were able to shoot the movie around John Cena's reflective helmet. So there's a part where the helmet is sitting on the ground and you can see a fight play out between the two actors in this scene, right? So most of the fight, you can see they're punching each other and everything, and you see it in the helmet, but you don't see them not see them actually fighting. So I imagine that they had to go through a lot of work to get that scene to work. So getting a scene in this movie, in this vampire movie, where you have You have them dancing in a club, and you have the mirror, and you're
Yeah.
trying to do this scene where you don't catch his reflection. I imagine that's got to be pretty difficult.
Well, you didn't have the technology to be able to go back in and edit it like you
Right,
could
right,
now.
right. Something like that is hard to fix. So, oh my God, Zach, you know where we're at? I'm totally lost.
Yeah, we're at G.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank that's good looking out. So the cast and crew members have recalled that Roddy McDowell videotaped extensive on-set behind-the-scenes footage. None of them saw the tapes, and their whereabouts remain unknown. And Roddy McDowell has since passed away, so he has footage of behind the scenes of the movie, and we will never know what happened. But I think that he was an early YouTube, not YouTuber. That's not the right word. He was a
Videographer.
Yeah, he was an early videographer on that project. So I just thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
One of the life masks of Roddy McDowell's taken from the Planet of the Apes franchise is visible in Peter Vincent's apartment.
Yeah, I was looking for that, but I didn't recognize it because I wrote this before I watched the movie's house. Let me see if I can find that mask, because he had a lot of masks in there, but I couldn't find it. I guess you can go ahead. That's the only comment I got on that one.
Okay. A puppet that was created for the ghost librarian Monstrous Visage in Ghostbusters 1984 was rejected as being too terrifying for a PG movie. When the FX crew subsequently went to work on this film, they realized the rejected model resembled the vampire bat that they had created. So they repurposed and utilized it for the vampire's fiery destruction.
Right. So I thought that was pretty awesome. There's another tale of, movie productions reusing props. In this case, a prop that didn't get actually used, and it was like, oh, we can use this, and it did look rather terrifying.
Yeah. Yes.
So the most financially successful horror film of the 1985 summer season, and the second highest grossing horror film of 1985, behind A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, came out in 1985. So yeah, that is honorable that you can be. And this is before the Friday the 13th series started going bad, right? This is when it was still good.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's them's bragging rights right there. Go ahead, Zach.
Because of the horrible experience he had making The Sentinel that came out in 1977, Chris Sarandon was apprehensive about taking a role in another horror movie. Meanwhile, writer Tom Holland decided to direct Fright Night himself because he was so disgusted by the film that that had been made from his last screenplay, Scream for Help, that came out in 1984. Both movies were directed by Michael Weiner.
I think that's Winner.
Winner's,
okay. Yeah, Winner's
Michael Winner.
I learned that Winner is an actual last name that somebody could have. So yeah, I guess they were both discussing. It's like, yeah, he directed that movie. Yeah, he directed my movie too. Yeah, he was gross, man. I'm telling you, man, we could do this.
So maybe Wiener was a fitting name in that, at least in their minds.
Right. They were probably calling him Wiener behind his back because he probably wasn't a very good director. Like it says that Tom Holland was disgusted, right? It's like, that's not what I wrote. Don't you get what I was trying to write? Right. So yeah, that's interesting.
While blocking a scare scene, director Tom Holland asked visual effects man Randall William Cook if he could devise a shark mouth for one of the vampires. There was neither time nor money left in the budget to create an elaborate prosthetic, but Cook agreed to concoct a rig over the weekend with the proviso that it would only be seen on screen for a few seconds. Ultimately, the crudely made mouthpiece was not only featured extensively in the film, it was also utilized in the movie's famous poster art.
So that's kind of funny. It's like, all right, we're out of money. We can't pay you anymore, but could you just do something? It's like, okay, I got some toothpicks and some twigs in the back. I'm gonna make up something, but I can't have people looking at bad work. You understand? I have a reputation to maintain. I can't have people looking at me. If they see this, they won't want to hire me no more. So if you're going to have it in a movie, just put it in for a couple of seconds. And then Tom Holland said, bet. And then he featured it exclusively in the movie. He was like, nah, man, this is awesome. You don't understand. I have to have it. So Amanda Burse. I keep wanting to say Barnes for some reason, but Amanda Bierce was required to remove her top for a scene in the film, which her back and shoulders were viewed, but she was uncomfortable being topless in front of the crew, so she covered her breasts with duct tapes. So she was like, no nips. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost a requirement in the movies of the 80s where they feel like they need to have the female lead go topless, and there's a lot of convincing going on. It's almost like trying to convince somebody to be a suicide bomber. You know, I liken it to that.
However, I will say this, I'll add this just to be fair play. There is a movie from the 1980s that Johnny Depp was the star in, and it's called Private Resort. And yeah, he's butt naked.
Yeah, I don't think guys have a problem being butt naked. It's that,
but even then, that was still, how many times did you see? It was always the woman going topless. You wouldn't see a guy going right, anything.
Right. They do that entirely too often. But yeah, you'll see that a lot in these films, and then a lot of times it'll get out that this female wasn't down with this. It took a lot of convincing to do this. We did an episode where we talked about it was Desperado, and we talked to what's her name, the female lead. Dang it.
I want to say Selma Hayek, but I don't think.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, because I could see her face, couldn't remember her name. Selma Hayek. So she was essentially bullied by both Robert Rodriguez and the lead actor into doing this sex scene that she did not want to do. It wasn't discussed before. It is not something that they talked about pre-production when they negotiating her being in this film. It's like they kind of sprung it on her, so she didn't want to do it. She was like, during the scene, she's crying all the time. So Rodriguez had to take a bunch of takes until, like, he wanted to do kind of like a long, drawn out love scene, almost like what you've seen in this movie. But instead, he had to do a bunch of quick, edits. So you got a bunch of tiny scenes that was kind of welded into one long scene, which is not exactly what he wanted. But Salma Hayek did not want to do that, and she was emotionally distressed. She just mentioned that this year, like so apparently it's been bugging her basically her entire life that she had to go through that.
Well, I mean, look at Basic Instinct. You know, the infamous, which there's a lot of, but I mean, that being said, and I'll get some heat for this. Why did you go on set with no underwear?
Did she do that on purpose?
She says she didn't. And I mean, but my question is, if this is a potential, you know, you're going to be sitting there, you know, you're going to uncross your legs. Why would you choose not to wear underwear? Just curious.
Right.
She says she didn't know. She said that she didn't realize that they were taping. She, you know, all these little things, but what it boils down to is, if you knew you were going to be on set and you knew the shot was going to involve you crossing and uncrossing your legs, why would you not wear underwear, especially with a dress that short?
And it's not something that they asked her to do, right? They didn't ask her to go on the set without underwear.
Not to my knowledge, but I don't know. The story has changed and evolved over the years. So
right.
Who really
I think
knows?
what happened is that it's something that maybe she wanted to do, and then she got some heat for it. So she kind of walked it back. It's like, well, I didn't know this or that. I don't know. I'll just say that I enjoyed the movie, and Sharon Stone's a great actress. I'll just say that.
Yes. I mean, I enjoyed Basic Instinct. I love the movie. And here's the thing. The scene created a controversy. And as we all know, sex and controversy sells. It sells box office tickets. So whether it meant to happen or not, it's something that we're still talking about how many years later.
Right. Absolutely. So that's awesome. So I didn't get to ask you, does that, the whole thing is that, you're my clone, trying to figure out if you like the same things I like. Did you like this movie, Fright Night?
Yeah, I liked it.
So yeah, I thought so. I figured it out. I figured it. But then this wasn't hard because there are a lot of people who like this movie. Sometimes I choose movies that are on the edge, movies that was that were critically panned that just tickled me personally. So those movies are risky, but this one, it was universally loved, and I loved it when I was growing up, and I figured that you would like it. So Dina, how about you? Did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, let's be honest here. Last time I was a guest on your podcast, we kind of talked about this. So this is kind of why this whole moment transpired, because I did like it. It's one of those, there's a couple of horror movies that I like, and this is one of them. So
yeah, I'm a lot like you. Last episode we had Josh from the VHS Files podcast, and Josh is really into horror. Like, he's seen every single John Carpenter film. He absolutely revers the horror genre. He actually has like a special show called The Horror Section that he does on his podcast, where they just talk about horror movies. You know, he loves all even the cheesy, like, direct-to-video type horror movies, or the ones that only premiered overseas. Like, he's into all of that. So
the only John Carpenter movie you would catch me watching is Escape from New York.
Well, that and Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah, take that back. Yeah. And that's where we met. Hey,
right. That was our movie. And what was the other one? There might have been a couple other ones that he made. I mean, that are not horror movies, but
like The Thing and stuff. Nope,
right,
sorry.
Right.
Pass.
So they asked me, you know, it's like, because he was curious, like, you know, what is it that you don't like about horror movies, or why do I avoid them? And my answer is complex. I think it's basically your answer, because I'm a scaredy cat. But more complex is like, if it's done really well, the better it is. Because if I'm cajoled into watching it and it's a really, like, it has the great combination of suspense, of gore and horror, if they do it just right, then it'll be great and I'll love it. But it'll scare me, it'll scare and unnerve me, right? So
yes.
And that I avoid all of those feelings. I avoid being scared and unnerved. So, like, one of the best horror movies I saw was Saw 2. So it had all the great elements of horror. It had that suspense. It had, you know, the gore. Is basically the horror part of this particular horror movie is people having to hurt themselves in order to get out of traps, right?
Yeah.
That is a very difficult watch, right? You like being tortured, but somebody cuts out your tongue. That's bad. But then being forced to cut out your own tongue, oh, that's a no. My stomach is turning just talking about it. So
I will give you a real quick aside. I hate horror movies, and when Blair Witch came out, I was at dinner with one of my friends, and she really wanted to go see it, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to go see this. And she's like, oh, let's go. Finally, I decided I'll man up, and I'm gonna go, and we go to the midnight show to go see it. And I live not too far from a wooded area, so we go to the movie and watch it. And I think the last time I looked at the screen when they showed somebody's eyeballs, and I remember watching the movie like this the whole time with my hands over my face, peeking out through my fingers, because that's usually how I watch horror. And I remember going home and being a little freaked out because of all the trees and everything. And this is what gets me for the horror. This is what really gets me, is if it can that movie wasn't that scary. However, psychologically, it could mess with you because you never really saw what was getting them. So therefore, psychologically, it terrified me. And I had nightmares at night.
Right. Yeah. So, some of the best horror movies or monster movies, they kind of avoid showing you like the main creature until like near the very end, where it's an all-out action-packed just chase and gore scene. So that's pretty awesome. I'm glad Zachary liked it. I'm glad you liked it. So let's see what the critics think. What the critics think of this movie. But what I found on Rotten Tomatoes was that the critics gave it 92%. And the audience score was 76%, which is strange. I would think that it would be more even, but apparently the critics liked it way more than the audience did. And IMDb reviews gave it a 7.1 out of 10, which is comparable to what the audience thought. So, Zach, why don't you let us know, what did Sid Smith think?
Yeah, Sid Smith from Chicago Tribune from Fright Night danced on a tight wire between satire and terror, glittered by special effects and with it nonchalance.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm with that. I'm with that. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, Janet Maslin from New York Times. Its tone is never exactly comedic, and its horrific touches are more disgusting than scary.
You know, this is one of the weaker reviews, right? This is the so-called Rotten Tomato review, and she's not wrong, right?
No.
She's not wrong, but it was still entertaining. I find it very entertaining. So but I don't know if I would say it's more disgusting than scary, because the disgusting part is supposed to be the scary part.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't really disgusting, because I mean, Poltergeist with the guy peeling his face off was much more disgusting than that.
Right. Let us know what Carl thought.
Carl de los Santos, Smash Cut Reviews. Fright Night benefits from being one of the purest versions of horror/comedy. Both genres are equally represented without manipulation. The tropes of both combine to present real laughs with the terror and real terror with the laughs. And then People Magazine, basically this movie was made a lot better by Roman Polanski back in 1967 as the Fearless Vampire Killers.
You know, I don't remember that movie. So
me neither.
So to show what you know, People Magazine, the writer was so ashamed of writing this. They didn't even attribute it to a particular person. They just said it was, People Magazine. So they know they're wrong. But Carl de los Santos, he has a right of it. It was because it was like the other earlier review said, it kind of a balancing act. So I can understand the first review or the second review. They're just, well, we got to write something about this movie. What you go ahead, you write something and we'll put it out. We don't care. Right.
Yeah. Nobody's going to see it anyway.
Right. Nobody's going to see it. So Jake Euchre from F5 Wichita, Kansas, he gave it a 2 out of 5. What we have here are the only 3 so-called Rotten Tomato reviews of this movie. I like to put something that somebody actually wrote down from like a magazine or something. I don't know what F5 Wichita, Kansas is, and I don't know what it means to be rated 2 out of 5 from them. And I don't know who Jake Euchre is. So none of this has any meaning, but it was the only one that I could find on the website. I wasn't digging any deeper. But our friend Roger Ebert, our frenemy from the Chicago Sun-Times, he wrote, Fright Night is not a disgusting movie, but it has a lot of fun being. Oh, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. He wrote, Fright Night is not a distinguished movie, but it has a lot of fun being undistinguished. That's fair. That's fair. He can say that. This is a favorable review from him, by the way.
Oh yeah, and I mean, here's the thing. He's being honest. It's not a movie that's going to change your life.
Right.
It's a movie. I mean, you may remember it and say, "Oh yeah, I really like that movie," but it's not something that's going to change your life.
I think it's undistinguished because it follows it basically closely follows all of the Hollywood tropes. Even Vincent says, well, everything that we've done worked in the movie so far, right? He's everything we've done from the movies worked so far, because he doesn't know about vampire. He only knows what they do in his vampire movies. So he's doing all of the things they do in his movies. So if it worked in the movies, it's working in real life. So far so good. So I think that's what he means by it's not distinguished, and it has a lot of fun being undistinguished because it's playing with all of the vampire jokes and basically having fun with that. So those were our reviews, and as I said, mostly positive. When you go to the Rotten Tomatoes website, it's mostly positive reviews. So this is good. This is a fun movie. I'm glad we was able to have you over. And
thank you.
For anyone listening, Fright Night is, as of this recording, available on AMC Plus. And next week we're going to continue all Halloween all the time with The Fly, 1986. Dina, have you seen that one?
Oh, I saw it. I will tell you how I saw it. I saw it with my hands over my face, and I took it a step worse. I was turned around facing, watching it on the little itty bitty box that the little screen, the little window. Right. I was watching it that way as my roommates watched it, because I wasn't going to watch it. And I will say this, my roommates, they were so great. I never saw Friday or Nightmare on Elm Street. And then when I came home from work, they decided we were going to watch it. So we watched it and I was terrified. I kept covering my face. And then afterwards, they taped butter knives to their fingers and chased me around the house.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's
funny. And I had louver doors on my bedroom door, and they were like, Granny's coming to get you.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
I don't like scary movies.
Right.
Nope.
To me, The Fly was more suspenseful,
Yeah.
but it was a wonderful movie, and it's one of the best remakes that I've ever seen. Based on I don't know, the original Fly came out in like 20 or something like that. It was a while ago, but and that movie is basically they just had a fly's head on a dude's body and they called it a day. But this and this new movie,
I mean, I was gonna say it was good for what I saw of it before I got grossed out.
Right.
So.
Right, absolutely. This movie really took The Fly seriously. It was like, oh, what if we did? How could we do it if this were possible? Well, what would we do? How could a fly human hybrid happen? What would the psychological implications be? They really did a deep dive. It was like this movie was developed by a think tank to figure out how all this would happen. It was absolutely great. So one last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow. To do this, you can rate us or write a review on podchaser.com, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. And you can also share our show with someone, with a pound or the @ symbol at Backlick Cinema on your favorite social media sites. And Dina, once again, where can our audience find you?
My podcast is the Better 2 podcast with DM Needom. It's available on most podcast hosting sites. It's also available on YouTube as video. And if you want my website, it's dmneedom.com, Needom. And you can find my books there. There's also links to the podcast and the guest list of future guests coming up.
Awesome. All right. So
thank you again for having me. Sorry.
Thank you for being here. Zach, where can they find us if they want to email us?
Well, yeah. If they wanted to, they can contact us. They can contact us at fanmail@backlickcinema.com.
All right. Well, Dina, the glorious DM Needom, thank you once again for being here. It was so great having you here. I'm glad you was able to have a good time with this movie, even though this is not your favorite genre. This is still one of the great movies of the 1980s that came out, and very much appreciate you being here. I look forward to listening to more episodes of your podcast, and when the next book finally comes out, I'm going to go ahead and pick it up. So I'm pretty sure that you're going to splash out all over social media when it happens.
Yeah, it'll be a while, but yeah.
All right. And to our audience out there, as far as looking us up and giving us rating, please do that. Do that for this podcast. Do that for the Better 2 podcast. Believe me, it matters. Be safe, hug your loved ones, and be outstanding.
Thank you again.